Hello and welcome back to another edition of the CFB Nation Southeastern Recruiting Show. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and today's episode is going to be about the tight ends down south, and it is flat out a loaded group. There's going to be prospects from Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, several from Georgia. It's really good in Georgia this year. I don't know what it is in the water, but Georgia has a bunch of tight ends. Florida has a very unique player that I'll actually start off with once I get to the video portion of this. But this is the most important thing to know. You're going to find them all over the South. The tight ends and the flex tight ends are everywhere. And before I get into the specific prospects, I want to talk a little bit about how they have changed, meaning the tight ends in general, across not only high school and college football, but pro football. I've got some stats here that I knew they were good, but I didn't realize just how good. And these are guys that had changed positions, had gotten a lot bigger, etc. When they came out of high school, they weren't the premier guys, but the athleticism and the ability to want to learn their craft was the key. And it'll be the same with the players I'm going to show today. The two guys in question would be Travis Kelce and George Kittle. I'm sure if you're watching this show, you're familiar with them. I'm going to use them as an example, talk a little bit about their recruitment, then kind of break down one other player that's blown up. It's a South Florida kid that's now playing at Syracuse. I'll get to that. And then we'll use these guys as the barometer for why the prospects that I have coming on here in a little bit, and I'm going to show their film, are the ones that I selected. Remember now, Georgia just won the national title, but it's not your traditional Georgia team. They're using tight ends in a flex position, etc. So if Georgia's doing that, everybody is. Let's keep that in mind. Brock Bowers, obviously, is the player in question there. So last year, Kelce is about 250. He caught 110 passes, scored 10 times, 1,338 yards. But what was more important than that? It's how the Kansas City Chiefs utilized him. Not just in the slot, not just in the hip, in the backfield, out wide. They would use him in double tight end sets. He learned his craft. He learned the playbook and all that, and Andy Reid helped him out. I get it. Obviously, number 15, having Mahomes helps too. But this was a kid that was at Cincinnati playing defensive end and eventually switched over and played tight end for like a year and then went on to the NFL. It worked out, obviously. So what did he do differently than these other guys? He worked his craft after he got there. That's something you're going to hear me say over and over again. Kelce has tremendous hands. He can break down and make people miss. He has an incredible fluid motion when he comes in and out of cuts for a big guy. He's 6'4", 6'5", and even with his tremendous athleticism and teams knowing it, he catches passes sometimes when he's double teamed, which also does this. It opens up the game for other guys. Now, again, I know they've got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, and they've had an incredible array of talent at wide receiver over the time Pat's been the quarterback in Kansas City. But it starts with Kelce. They're down in 6. Where does Pat usually look? His flex tight end. In my opinion, Kelce is just a big wide receiver that can block, but whatever you want to call it. They'll use him in the hip on 3rd and 6, trying to get him on a linebacker. Sometimes they'll put him out to one side by himself, forcing either single coverage, or if you roll double coverage to that side, you're leaving 2/3 of the field single covered with a bunch of really good athletes. They make it a mismatch. And if you look at San Francisco, obviously they don't have Pat Mahomes at quarterback, but they still have tremendous players. George Kittle, about the same size, almost identical, 60 catches and 11 scores this past year. Now, how did he develop? Kittle was at the University of Iowa. He was just a guy, like 190, 200 pounds when he enrolled, but he could really run. In a straight line, that dude could go. So what did they do? They found ways to get him the ball even after, he gained a little weight. They got him in the rotation. He was like a 5th string guy. He came in the game a little bit like his second year on campus and just built from there. And by the time he was a senior for the University of Iowa, he was an All-American. But again, this was like a nobody in the recruiting rankings. He got bigger, faster, stronger. But the key here, the ability to make plays after the catch, be versatile in the passing game, in the hip, in the slot. out wide, motion, doing different things. Iowa did a tremendous job of getting the ball, and now the 49ers are doing the same, and he's one of the best tight ends in all of National Football League. This is the trend in football. There are a few guys that have come along in the last few years that have been really good in college that have went on. The kid out of Utah this past year, Michael Mayer, Notre Dame, etc. They can play in line, but they can also go out wide. That's what the NFL wants now, because if safeties don't really know where the tight end's going to line up, it can change where they go. It opens up other things for other players, and that ability to do it over and over again is just absolutely paramount. So here's another example, and it's in the college game, and I'm predicting this kid to be the next. I'm not saying he's going to be George Kittle or Kelce, but he's in that mold. Coming out of high school at American Heritage in South Florida, right on the edge of Fort Lauderdale, Oronde Gadsden was a kid that not many people knew about, or at least in terms of big rankings. But Gadsden was a player that did really well, got some offers, got a lot of the mid-major offers amongst Power 5, still Power 5, but Iowa State, Indiana, those kind of programs, but he decided on Syracuse. First year, he only caught a couple of balls, but this past year, he went bananas. He's about 215 now. I consider that to be big receiver, but he's listed tight end, flex tight end, whatever you want to call it. This is what he had this past season for Syracuse, and again, why it's so important, because they don't have the same kind of dynamic guys like Alabama, Texas, etc. They don't have as many dynamic guys. People focused on him even after he got going, and he still put up these numbers. 61 receptions, 969 yards, 15.9 yards per catch, and 6 scores. This is Syracuse. This is not a guy that's benefiting, even like Kelce is with the Chiefs, with all the speed they have at receiver. They've got good players at Syracuse, but they don't have a ton of NFL receivers, and he's tearing it up. The bigger, taller guys that can break down and make somebody miss, they are a nightmare. And in my opinion, it is the key for how teams can kind of like compete with, well, ironically, Georgia, Alabama, etc. You're not going to just beat them up in the box and run downhill at them on everything. You're just not. They're going to out-recruit you there, and they've got numbers galore. You got to be able to throw the football, one, just in general, and two, you also have to be able to be diverse, even if you're out in 22 package, meaning 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. You have to be able to throw the football to those guys, use them in a variety of ways. Gadsden for Syracuse is an example of that. When you have a player that can be out wide and challenge your best corner, hypothetically, if that's who you choose to put on him, or if you don't want your best corner out there on him because he's a 5'10", 170 guy, and that is an awkward match, then you've got to put a linebacker or a safety or a really big corner you may not be as comfortable with on a kid that weighs 215, or at least he did last year. Imagine Gadsden's probably gained a little weight. But if you're going to go after these guys, you have to make sure that there's a couple of things that you do. You better have really good players if you're going to play man, and you also got to have a scheme that can kind of corral some of the other players. That's easier said than done. I don't think a lot of guys in college football as defensive coordinators have the personnel to really challenge big-time flex tight ends, and how guys like Mayer did last year are really good proof of that. It's Notre Dame didn't have many options, that's for sure. At receiver, their receiver room was really in shambles, and even though it got better as the year went on, they relied on Michael Mayer. He lined up in the slot out wide. They put him in the backfield and run him in a cross and motion, all kinds of things. And he was an impact player regardless. He could still block, and that's part of what some of these guys I'm going to talk about here in a second need to do. But if you can't run and block consistently, then to me, you're more of a receiver anyway. Flex tight end means you can do both. You can be an inline and you can be outside. So with that, this is the list of players down south that are in the class of 25 that I'm going to talk about. And the first one is a guy that's still a little bit developmental, but I like his film. He's at a really good program, one I'm very familiar with, Wharton High School in Tampa. And he reminds me so much of Gadsden, and they're almost identical size. Now he's a little bit further ahead in maturity, but all the things that he was out of high school, I'm going to go with him first, just kind of show things like where it can go. His name is Tamez Young. He's got 3 offers: Toledo, USF, and Rutgers. And he's thinking, well, he's not that good. Well, he's got 2 years of high school left, and he's only 215 right now. He plays in the hip for them. He'll play in the slot. They'll use him on screens and stuff. Very physical kid. He'll come out and get you. Linebacker, safety, whatever. He is a tremendous blocker, and he's only 215 right now based on the film I'm going to show. But he's a kid that'll get after it blocking. The next kid is the one everybody in the country has wanted. Many college coaches, recruiting services, etc., think he's the best tight end in the class of 2025, regardless of how you rank it. Flex, inline, whatever. Elyiss Williams. He's at one of the big county schools in central to south Georgia, Camden County, and he has tremendous wingspan. He's 6'6", 6'7", 230, something like that, 235. Camden County is always playing big school football. They're going against top teams. He knows what it's like to be in a weight room and all that. Georgia's got his commitment, but he had offers from frickin' everybody. Arguably one of the top 25 players in the class of 25. Elyiss Williams, when I put up his film, you will not be disappointed. I'm going to show it at the end. All the film's going to be at the end, one after the other. Next, Ryan, the state of Georgia is loaded at tight end. Ryan Ghea, Milton High School, Alpharetta. It's on the north side of Atlanta. Auburn, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Florida State. He's got the long list. Very similar size to Williams, also, again, from Georgia. But he's 6'5", 230, give or take. And he's a kid that can move around and do different things too. See this theme? This is something everybody's trying to carbon copy what the elite teams in the NFL have done. And it's a mismatch, man. That even in 22 personnel, teams don't know what to do. I put 3 linebackers out there. If you got guys that are 230, 6'4", 6'5", that could run, if they can block it all, you can really fool teams whether or not they're in line on a play. Then you go like no huddle. They come out and they're in the slot. You got a slow linebacker on them. You can have all you want. That's carte blanche at the passing game. This is a kid that plays against tremendous competition. North edge of Atlanta, there is no hiding there. And it's a big 7A school, tremendous high school too, really good high school. This is one of my favorite players. And if he was at the same high school that Ryan Ghea was, he'd have a ton more offers. Micah Jones is at Central High School in Madison, Mississippi. Very athletic. Again, another long, lean kid, 6'5", 225. Ole Miss and Mississippi State have offered. Maybe he just doesn't want to leave, and some of the coaches know. But I found it very, very interesting. A kid that was he's like a basketball kid that could play D1 hoops. He can go get it from the slot or whatever. He could probably be a big receiver if he really tried not to gain weight, but I'm sure he's going to get up close to 250. I will be shocked if Jones doesn't end up being one of the top 10 tight ends in all the rankings. I know he's Mississippi, and it's part of the deal down here. There aren't many scouts there. Not as many people see him. Tremendous athlete, and I think he's a kid that's going to end up picking his school. Once he goes around a little bit more, some of the other SEC schools are going to offer this kid. Next is a legacy. Brooking, if that sounds familiar to anybody, dad was an NFL player, played at Georgia Tech, Keith Brooking. Logan Brooking is at Christian High School in Savannah. It's a good program, and he is a tight end. His dad was, again, a linebacker, but his dad could have played tight end. South Carolina, Georgia Tech, Florida, Penn State, Virginia Tech, UCF, Michigan State, Duke, Tennessee, Miami. All those schools are involved in and have offered. That area, by the way, in Savannah is underrated. Not many people get down there. They need to recruit it more. That's a good area. Another kid that can be an inline player. If he's Keith Brooking's kid, I guarantee he can play inline. He's going to be a tough kid. But he's a guy that can go out and catch the ball too. We'll see that here in a little bit. Speaking of, and I put them back-to-back for a reason, David LaFleur was a tight end at LSU, went on to the NFL, etc. His son, John David LaFleur, Sulpher, Louisiana, LSU, Texas A&M, Texas Tech. He's got several offers. Big kid, 6'6", 230. I think he could even, with his frame, it's not out of the realm of question. He could grow in an offensive lineman. He's got 2 years of high school. That wouldn't be the first time. There's a lot of guys that do that. If you look at him catching the football and everything naturally away from his body, Really good football player in that sense. It's natural to him. Hand-eye coordination is good. The other part about him that I find intriguing, while he's not the fastest kid by any means, LaFleur finds little niches where he can sit down or he'll slow up just a little bit, not to run into the next guy. He's got a feel. Kind of like his dad. His dad was I remember his dad as a recruit. He's got a feel for what that situation's like, where I've got to make it happen here. It's third down. He's the guy you look for. He's playing in Louisiana, which that's self-explanatory. You're going to have plenty of opportunity there. If you're in Louisiana, you're playing against some pretty good competition. And he's a big, powerful kid, really a bulldozer. Out of all these players, LaFleur is the most likely to be a more pure, inline blocking tight end. Eli Owens, Alcoa, Tennessee, Ohio State, Bama, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Michigan, Kentucky, a whole bunch of offers. This one's a little bit different. It's interesting with Eli. He can play in the hip. He can play out wide. He's not as tall as some other guys, but he can really run. It's interesting to see the variety with tight end now. The H-back positions kind of replaced the fullback anyway. Seeing this kid move around and like the diversity of schools that have offered him, like Ohio State does a tremendous job with their one-back sets using a fullback, H-back. They have actually, even before Ryan Day got there, they'll do that on occasion. This is a kid that could fit that. I'm not surprised that Ohio State offered based on that. But I also think it's interesting that he has the local offers too. When you got Tennessee and Alabama before your junior year of high school, you're a pretty good player. So one other guy, and it's very similar, Emaree Winston. Just a guy that could run. He's from Calhoun. It's about an hour northwest of Atlanta, right off I-75. That's a program that always has players, Calhoun High School. And his offer list, it's pretty much the same in a lot of ways as Eli Owens. They actually don't live that far from each other. Tennessee, South Carolina, Bama, Southern Cal's even offered, Auburn. I mean, he's got a ton. Ole Miss, Ohio State. This is another kid you could play in the hip if you want to do different things, give or take 230. When you could move and change positions, again, it's the same thing. They can make plays for you in space that other teams don't know how to account for, play to play, and it really causes havoc for the personnel package that the defensive coordinator for the opposition has to put in the game. You're guessing. Offenses and these spread offenses, they just have such an advantage. Might as well take it to the fullest. If you can get some blocking out of these guys even a little bit, they don't even have to be great, because on 2nd and 9, they can know you're going to pass, but their linebacker that's in the game, he's not going to be able to cover somebody like Emaree Winston. He's just not. It's not normal. So this is why I'm going with these kids. So let's watch some film. We're going to start off with my guy in Tampa. Now, again, this is a kid that's not quite as well known, but don't take that for granted here. This is a kid that can play. And I like his physicality more than anything. There'll be some blocking here in just a minute. But right now, he's just a really big receiver that likes to be physical. Young has quite a few plays on this film where he's in the slot, and linebackers like right there, that they got no depth and they got smoked. He's not a burner per se, but he's a strong, physical kid, and he's got really good hands. To reiterate, he's got 3 offers to date. USF, Toledo, and Rutgers. Look at him be physical. That's important. If you're going to be any form of a tight end, here he is just on the edge of the line. Again, they get no depth at linebacker, and he makes them pay. He lined up several times on his sophomore film in this same spot, and they mixed it up whether he was going to run or go out for a pass. Did a nice job. Look at the power, staying with it. Really does a nice job. There's a couple really good blocks here. Look at that. Got him in the hip right here. Just levels that kid. One more play, then we'll go on to the next. Yeah, he can definitely play Power 5 football. So if you look at these kids again, it's the balance, being able to block, being able to run routes and catch. It's not one or the other. It's both. Now, this next young man, Elyiss, this is a tremendous prospect. He's about as difficult to defend as you're going to get. They used him pretty much just like a wide receiver at Camden County. There's a whole bunch of plays where he throw deep, and he makes people look pretty bad. High school kids that are at corner, this is one of those deals. They just used a corner out there on him. He's not going to be able to handle him physically, and he just breaks the tackle and gets to the goal line. Look at the wingspan. And he was determined there. Everybody tried to get to him, but really powerful. Seeing a big man like that catch the football over his shoulder, that's impressive. Look at the reach. That's why most people have him number one in the country. Maybe not everybody, but I can see why. Can't teach the natural physical tools. And then again, the size right there, really simple play. Just fended off the defensive player with his size and used his length to get to the football. It's also interesting to see how long-legged he is. He reminds me of a basketball player. He plays a little DN too. He would be a pretty darn good one. I'm sure he's committed to Georgia. I'm sure Kirby wouldn't mind that, but I'm going to guess that the offensive coaching staff would be rather mad at Kirby if they moved him over to catch passes, or excuse me, the defensive staff got him and he didn't get to catch passes. One more play here. This just kind of shows his athleticism, seeing him in this situation. You can see his length really well when he's on the defensive side of the football. That's impressive. All right. Next up, Ryan Ghea. Now, I don't know as much about him as some other kids. I've seen his film a few times, but this is another kid that has the power to make it work. Anytime he gets in an inline situation or on the edge, he can hit somebody and move them off. And he's got 2 years of high school left. All right. He does like to block. It's interesting here. Simple route, and the safety just screwed up. Left him open. He makes a really nice catch away from his body. Maybe I'm just a sucker for old school football, but I really like seeing the tight ends be aggressive in the screen game and the run game. So he buries that kid going out of bounds. Really good hands away from the body. Nice throw right there. Here he is playing in the hip. This is one of those plays where power really does matter. He throws the guy to the ground. One more play for Ryan. Like the effort there. That's just good stuff. If you look at the future of college football, just as a quick note, you're going to see more length at every position. Tight end, it's always been there. But now it's amazing to me how some of the guys that are 220, 225 seem to have the power because of the strength and conditioning programs to do a pretty darn good job of being straight ahead blockers. Just something to think about. All right. Next up, Micah Jones. This is a young man that I mentioned earlier that probably hasn't received the attention that he deserves. Really good athlete in space. Almost like just having a wide receiver. Here he's in the hip. Once again, linebacker doesn't get quite enough depth, and I'll give him credit. Jones did a nice job. He's at Central High School in Madison, Mississippi. As a reminder, that high school has had a lot of players over the years, recruited by Southern Miss, Ole Miss, Memphis, LSU, etc. Everybody kind of stops through there. Look how fluid he is. Catch that away from his body, even having to go to ground. Well done. He makes it look pretty easy for a big guy. One more for him. This time he's attached on the right. This rolls. This is where you can see some of the athleticism at work. Once again, when you could move them around, they can play in the hip, on the line, etc. Makes it much more difficult. Keith Brooking's kid, Logan Brooking. It's amazing that some of these guys that I knew as I was growing up are having kids that are really good players, and that's a heck of a catch right there. And they seem to play so much like their fathers. This young man and LaFleur, who I'll show here in a minute, are very similar in that regard. Playing a little defense. Nice job. Like his daddy, pretty darn physical. Gets behind the defense, makes an over-the-shoulder catch. Nice play. He has a bunch of offers, as I mentioned earlier. I'll be curious to see if he ends up at Georgia Tech like his father did. They're trying to resurrect that program, and they've gotten some pretty good players to commit, but they certainly have a long way to go. Here we go. One last play from Mr. Brooking. Determined run. Very determined. All right. Winston. This is a kid that you could probably play at fullback, H-back, whatever it is that you really wanted to do. Look at that. Determined. He's not as big in terms of height as some other guys, but he plays like a receiver in terms of his hands and right here, making guys miss, being nimble, keeping his balance, and then he's physical after contact. This is what I mean by like play to play where he winds up. It's got to be a pain dealing with guys like this. And this is the same stuff that you would see from Kelce or Kittle. Look at the strength. Wildcat with your tight end. How about that? What an athlete. Calhoun plays good competition, and he still takes care of business. That's impressive. One more play here. Down on the goal line. Nice job. LaFleur is a young man that I believe, again, is probably the most natural, traditional tight end out of this entire group. Big kid that just moves the pile like this place. Man, what an uplifting play that is for your team. Dragging guys. And here he is as an inline blocker, not surprised. But when he does go to the slot like this, he may not be a burner, but he finds a way to get open. And he's got really good hands. His dad was one heck of a player. Playing in the hip. Simple pass across the middle. He almost always makes the first guy either miss or just breaks the tackle. He does a nice job. Nice job of getting across the formation. That's an old school West Coast offense play right there. Look at that. Nice throw. Not the fastest guy, but he's just seemingly always open. And he's always about effort too. Here's one more play from him. Gets out there and helps his teammate. So it's amazing what a simple opportunity to block can do. And if you're not able to block, I know a lot of these guys are tremendous athletes, but if you can't block, they're not going to play you that much. They're just not. They're just not. Alcoa, Tennessee. Eli Owens. Look at that. He got popped. Makes the first guy just be upset about hitting him. Makes the second guy miss. Outruns everybody else. He is built really well in the lower body, and the power is there. That's a pretty good angle to look at his frame. Fights his way through the middle, comes across on an over, and lo and behold, no depth from the corner. He took a shot, but he still got into the end zone. Does a nice job coming across on that West Coast play that they obviously run as well. He's got a pretty good motor, and he's pretty nimble in space too. Eli Owens is not just a random tight end that plays a little in the hip. He can do a little bit of everything. Good job here running his feet after contact and just buried that guy. Whoever that is a pretty darn good running back too. I don't know why they didn't put anybody on him, but They got paid. They're going to pay for it, obviously, on this play. That's what he should do. When you get an opportunity, there's a bust, got to make the most of it. Natural hands. One more play here in the hip. Buries this guy. All right. So overall, this tight end group down south is a very good one. There's no question. Size, like Elyiss, I think has the most upside just because of the height. But like the guy I just showed, UI, Emaree, really all of them, you can do any of the things that you would want. Fullback, H-back, in the hip, as they call it. Play them in the slot, even go out wide. You can create mismatches. This is the new wave of college football. Anybody that doesn't use this, I don't know why you would. Even Mississippi State, which runs a very traditional air raid offense, if they've got a 6'4", 230 kid, it's going to be a problem. Teams don't know where they're going to line up. If you can get them to learn the playbook, man, it's a rough deal. That's why college football has seen more and more tight ends get involved. And the same with the pro level. Again, Kittle and Kelce. Both those guys weren't the biggest necessarily when they came out of high school, got a lot bigger, got a lot stronger, still kept their hands, they worked their craft. Now they're, headed towards Hall of Fame careers. So please like this podcast. Please share it. Please hit that notification bell. And above all else, for me, as I always like to say here at CFB Nation, please comment. Let me know what you liked about the show, things that you're curious about from any of these players. If you've got comments, somebody else you want to hear about, something else that's important that you think I didn't talk about, whatever it may be, I'm happy to dive in and discuss it because I talk football every day. Today won't be any different either. So with that, Brian Smith signing off. Everybody have a great day.